Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Elias. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. In today's video, we're just going to be talking about all of the books I have recently read in the past, I think from like August, September till now. I gotta say, this year has pretty much been one of the worst reading years I've pretty much ever had. Also, it sounds like if I have cock in my throat, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather still, so that's probably why. But moving on, this has been the year where I have read the least amount of books. Now, I'm not comparing my self-worth to the amount of books that I have read. It's pretty much the quality of books, the amount of books that I have been reading, the books that I've been reading in general have just not been it. The quality and the quantity have just not been there. I haven't been enjoying most of the books that I have been reading. And actually, there hasn't even been a whole lot of like DNFs or subpar books in general. I think I only gave like maybe a handful of books under 2 stars even, right? There have been a lot of favorites this year though, don't get me wrong. However, overall, I feel like my reading journey or experiences so far this year have been really lacking. Hopefully a problem I'll overcome in 2024. Actually, before we get further into the video though, I would like to give a huge shout out to today's video sponsor, Smalls. Okay, hear me out. If you have a beloved pet cat, you really want to stay for this segment. So Smalls is a fresh cat food company that delivers fresh, high quality cat foods to your door. It is so freaking great. Pura absolutely goes feral every single time I go to the refrigerator, open up the packet, he comes in screaming into the kitchen, meow, meow, meow. Feed me now. And I'm just like staring at him, preparing the food, being like, bitch, you gotta wait. But of course, he never listens. He freaking loves it. I've been using Smalls for the past 3 months now. The amount of food that they have sent over is glorious, so he'll definitely be stacked for the next year or so. What's really great and unique about Smalls ingredients though is that they only use all natural human grade ingredients. They never use fillers, preservatives, or artificial ingredients in their food. They're also always packed with more than 80% protein, promoting a healthier lifestyle for cats as well. So they essentially send you over a frozen box of cat food like this, right? And it comes with like a variety of different flavors from like smooth cow, smooth fish, smooth bird, ground cow, ground bird. Pura's favorite though is the bird. You just stuff them into the freezer when you're ready, you just stick one into the fridge to thaw. And when it's mealtime, all you gotta do is take it out, open it, fluff it, feed it, and there you are, you're all set. If you guys are interested in feeding your furry friend a healthier and well-balanced diet, you can check out Smalls using my link below. Again, as always, everything is linked, and thank you to Smalls for sponsoring today's video. Okay, let's get into this. Right, first up is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I read this with Kayla for her book club. I gotta say, I was not a huge fan of this book. This is the latest Riley Sager book, and apparently this was supposed to be like his last one before he went on like a big hiatus. However, he's writing a new thriller that's coming out next year. It'll be the first thriller POV where the character isn't female. It'll have a male character as its main character for the first time because he typically writes all of his thrillers from female perspectives. And I gotta say, a lot of them, pretty much all of them, aren't as great. This one was no exception. I do feel like he did play it really safe with this one. I think out of all of his books, this one is the most accessible in terms of like, there's barely any gore. The mystery is very subpar. Everything is very subdued and very quiet. I think it's a very great intro spoon-fed thriller for anyone who wants to get into the genre. However, as someone who has read pretty much all of his books by now, considering this is his latest one, I felt like it was just too safe. Now, I'm not expecting like huge plot twists or anything, right? I do appreciate a good plot twist now and then, and the journey is the most important. The journey it takes to get there to that plot twist. 2/3 of this book, nothing was happening, like at all. I felt like I could have skipped the majority of this book and went on to the ending and pretty much have gotten the same feeling if I did read the entire book in its entirety, right? It has all the formulaic Riley Sager classic tropes, if you will. You obviously have the poor, broke, tragic female character who meets a hot handyman, as always, along with the backdrop of a huge, creepy, mysterious house with a really devastating, tragic past. Look, I'm not saying the thriller has those tropes. In general, it's gonna be, pretty bad or anything. But Riley, considering this is like, what, your 6th or 7th book by now, I would have thought we would be reinvented somewhere. That wasn't the case at all. It was very safe, very slow, very boring, and didn't really offer anything new. Again, I don't really have anything constructive or negative to say about this book other than the fact that, hey, if you're wanting to get into the thriller genre, this is the book for you. Otherwise, I feel like if you have read his other books, you can definitely skip it. All right, so the next book that I read, I absolutely devoured and fucking loved. This one is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and To Fucking Morrow. I fucking love this book. This is one of the books where I I understand and I get the hype surrounding this book. So this is one of the books earlier in the year where I've heard so much buzz surrounding it for some strange reason. I don't know. I didn't know what it was about this book that just garnered so much praise and hype. And after finally reading it, I totally get it. I totally understand. I think it's one of those books that does character relationships really, really well. And of course, the strong, lovely writing here really hones all of those relationships really well. Oh my god, the characters, I fell in love with the characters, but the way the author crafts these characters together, you really rejoice in their celebrations, in their downfalls, and just in their tribulations and sadness and agony. Trust me, there's a whole lot of sadness and agony regarding the characters in the story in this book. I don't even want to say anything else because just know that going into this book, it's primarily about two best friends who make a game together and the outcome, the rise of fame and the downfall of certain things that come from their relationship together. This is a relationship that we see blossom within a really long time frame. So it did give me a little life vibes, in that regard. So if you're looking for a book that does character relationships really well, especially friendships in that category, and just sort of like unrequited love, look no further because I fucking cried. I absolutely just died reading this book. I'll insert clips here. I'm sad. Fuck. What the fuck? I can't stop crying. After reading this, I truly died of dysentery. If you know, you know, okay? Best character, hands down. But for the people who have read this book, if you get it, you get it. If you know, you know. Alright, so this next book I read for a really fun challenge. I made a whole reading vlog about it if you guys want to watch that. Basically where I read 200 pages a day for a week, and I only read from the fantasy genre. I read 3 different books, the first one up being Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So this one, I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did. It was rather a fun surprise, actually. Just going in thinking I would absolutely hate and detest the characters, the story, it's just everything about it, right? But for some reason, this was definitely one of the most fun I've ever had reading a book in a long while. Yeah, this is one of the few books that blew up outside of book talk. I would honestly compare the hype and just the recognition of this book to like Seven Husbands of like Evelyn Hugo, or even Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. Like so much hype surrounding this book. I don't want to say for good reason because I don't know. I feel like it's very subjective there. People who really like romance fantasy will really eat the shit up. However, I'm not really into romance fantasy in general, but I did have a rather good time, like an enjoyable time reading this. It was just really fun, really stupid, really ridiculous, but I had a good time, right? It's just one of those things where you just shut off your brain and let the book do all the talking. So, and a lot of talking it did. All right, so this next romance fantasy book that I read is A Taste of Golden Iron. This one was also the Patreon book club that I read with my patrons. And collectively, I think we can all agree that we were not the biggest fan of this book. I think overall it was very slow and very mid. Listen, I don't mind slow books, but just everything surrounding these characters, like the premise sounded better than the actual story itself for me. Like this cover art right here, and I gotta say, like maybe a third of the book, chef's kiss. Like I loved reading about the relationship between the bodyguard and the prince in the beginning, right? It just sort of like flatlined and just staled out for me. It's definitely one of those books where you're just reading for vibes, not even plots, nothing, not even for the characters here. It's just all vibes. This is also a very slow historical fantasy with really strong political mystery and court warfare as well. There were some tidbits here and there that were really interesting to go over and read about. However, I feel like some of those tidbits never just ventured out or expanded into something that was more. I feel like the characters, the intrigue, the story just never elevated for me. It was like looking at a pretty picture and that was pretty much it. At the end of the day, it's a very subdued, quiet fantasy with just a rather shallow plot, I gotta say. So there you go. All right, so the next book is Half a Soul. This was fine. It had some really interesting plot points and aspects to it. Some of the like ideas in this book were really interesting. Primarily follows this young woman whose soul, like half of her soul gets taken. So she doesn't really feel a lot of the human emotions that a regular human is supposed to feel. So because she only has half of her soul, she only feels half human, if that makes any sense. Until one day she meets this renowned, like, mad sorcerer. Their relationship was pretty much the strongest focal points in the book for me because it's just really interesting reading about how she would navigate just throughout her day or just the relationship in general because she doesn't feel like a lot of emotions or things that a normal human should. And her love interest is always like confounded and confused when she does or says the exact opposite of what he expects her to say or do. This was just like a very light-hearted, fluffy type of romance with a sprinkle and dash of fun light magic. It was also really short. I appreciated because it felt like reading a glorified fairy tale. It wasn't as memorable for me as other people who have really, really liked this book. I've also heard it compared to Howl's Moving Castle, and while I can see some similarities between Howl and the main love interest, that was pretty much it. It's definitely more Bridgerton vibes with a dash of magic. So there you go. Okay, so this next book I read on my Kindle, and it's Pen Pal. This was a short horror story that was based on sort of like a creepypasta or a series of short horror stories that was circulating online before it became super popular and re-edited and just written for a book. And I gotta say, while it was creepy in some sense, it wasn't very good. I felt like maybe the impact would have been better reading it online in its format or whatever, or maybe as a podcast, because reading it in its book form was sort of like a different matter. So I'm typically one of those people who don't mind grammatical errors or just like edits in their books, right? Like I'm like, whatever, it's fine. However, this book, oh my God, needed an editor. Like the run-on sentences, the author, the editor, whatever, has never heard of like a comma or a period. Like that sentence would just keep on going and going and going, and then it would stop. And then a whole new sentence would also later refer back to the run sentence that we would read. So it was just like this huge cycle of like repetition and repeating. However, I'm not, trying to bash on the book primarily for its like editing mistakes or whatever, because that's not what we're here for this particular book. It's a very short book. It's a horror book released such a long time ago, right? It was just something I noticed, something that I kind of couldn't get over because it did hinder my reading experience. But I gotta say, it was a little unique. I've never read anything like it before. However, it wasn't as horrifying or scary or malicious as I thought it would be. I mean, it was okay, but my expectations, for this book was different. This was a book I also read because of Book Talk, and you can check out that video where I read Book Talk's scariest book. But yeah, a lot of people were more creeped out by the story overall. I felt like I've read scarier and creepier and just more horrifying books than this one, so it didn't really faze me. There were some parts that were creepy, but other than that, it was pretty tame, pretty mild. So, all right, so this next book, also a Patreon buddy read, was What Moves the Dead. This was my first T. Kingfisher book. And I gotta say, I was pretty intrigued. I really like the writing style. The concept in the story for this one was that it was essentially a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher. It's straight up a retelling. Like, there wasn't anything new to this book. So I was a little surprised and taken aback by that, because if you know anything about The Fall of the House of Usher, the story, What Moves the Dead is pretty much like a straight up rehash of the events surrounding that whole tale. So I thought it was okay. It was fine. Normally I don't really have any problems with, retellings or anything, but since The Fall of the House of Usher was just such a short story in its entirety, reading about What Moves the Dead really felt like it was just the same thing, but the characters' names were just switched. This is my first book from this author. I do plan on reading more books from this author because I own a couple books from them as well. But yeah, I was just a little underwhelmed and surprised at that. So it was okay. So this next book that I read was getting a lot of buzz. A lot of people really liked it, and this is The Will of the Many. And okay, I liked it. However, I also didn't at the same time. I thought it sort of fell off, say maybe like halfway through. I thought the overall story was just so convoluted and confusing. Like I didn't understand a lot of the characters' motives because they all felt the same to me. Like there wasn't anything distinctive about the main character that set him apart from the other pivotal characters in this book, in this world. So it primarily follows the survived son of a massacred family who wants to take revenge on the Empire who just, wiped out his entire family. And to do that, he sort of infiltrates his way into like a higher caste, into the elite, into like this really prestigious academic school in order to infiltrate like the government and all that, and like this bigger picture. It was really interesting. The premise is what got me to read this book. However, it sort of fell apart for me just halfway through regarding just the characters in the story. I just didn't really care what happened because I already knew what was going to happen. Like the journey to get there wasn't as gripping as I thought it would be. The ending was the most confusing of all, to the point where I had to look on Reddit. What happened, especially in like the last 20 pages or so. And after doing my own research on what happened at the end, I thought it was really clever. Just not really well done, in my opinion. Like I was so confused. I don't know, maybe I'm stupid or something, because I read like the last 20 pages and I was like, I have no idea what the fuck is going on. So confusing to me. Like it was just building up so much momentum, and that was all we got. And I was like, what? I was really confused, really underwhelmed, had to go on Reddit. While it was interesting when it all clicked together for me, I don't see myself reading the sequel. Or maybe I'll just also go on Reddit and find out, what happens in the beginning of the sequel to see if, I'll be interested. It was also really funny to me how in this book, every single time a male character is mentioned, described, or introduced, he is written as hot, handsome, or rugged. The author, James, just really wanted you to know that. Literally almost every single male character, super handsome, very muscular. Shirts and tunics bulge. Like literally the water over there must be something in it, because LA water is not it. And it was just funny because the female characters, on the other hand, were mostly described by their hair color. Like not even their figure or complexion, it was literally their hair color. She was blonde, she was brunette, she was a dirty blonde, she had strawberry blonde hair. Like that was pretty much the distinct impression we got of any female character, for that matter. Oh, she was pretty, that was it. That was basically it. This was also definitely a book that sets up a lot of things for book 2. Like the stakes, but the stakes aren't there yet, or the stakes aren't as high. And so you never reach sort of like that satisfying climax. If you know, right? Like it just never pays off until you get to the second book. And I don't want to wait to get to that second book. Okay, so the next book we're going to talk about is Iron Flame, the sequel to Fourth Wing. So while I really enjoyed Fourth Wing, this one was a fucking disaster. I absolutely have no, you guys, the discrepancy between the two books, okay, you know what? Maybe I should have listened to every single 1-star review of Fourth Wing. How it's badly written, the characters are poorly formulated, the characters, the plot, everything about it, right? Maybe I should have fucking listened, because everything that they said they hated in book 1, I fucking hated in book 2. It just gave me PTSD flashbacks to From Blood and Ash from Jennifer L. Armentrout. It's easily the worst book I've read so far this year. The fact that I finished it surprises me as well. It took me, I gotta say, maybe 150 pages in, where I was like, you know what? This is actually really fucking bad. Maybe I should DNF. But no, I was like, maybe it gets better. Maybe something will change here. Like, why is it as long as it is? And mind you, this book came out 6 months after the first book, right? Which is literally unheard of. But you guys, this is why. This is fucking why I appreciate all of these sequels coming out a year or even 2 years later. Take An Ember in the Ashes by Sabata here. That series, for an example, the time frame between each consecutive book was 1 to 2 years minimum. And honestly, maybe that's how it should be, because what the fuck was this? It was so bad. It honestly made me rethink and revisit on why I enjoyed the first book so much as I did, right? It made me truly just second guess every single thing about what I enjoyed the first book. I was like, wait, did I really enjoy the first book, or what just fucking happened? Or was I just in a really depressed state and I read it and it gave me that small boost of serotonin where I was like, you know what? I'll give it more credit than where credit is due, because, it gave me that much. This book truly brought me down to my senses again. Really, truly. Thinking about this book again has just, I'm at a complete loss for words at how terrible this book was in terms of just formatting and editing, non-existent. You know how I was saying earlier with pen pal, where I was like, you know what? I could forgive some bad grammatical editing in books in general. I kid you not, there were around 10 to 20, even more grammatical errors. Sentences that didn't really make sense, that should have been restructured, or just the dialogue, the things that they would say were just fucking horrendous. So bad, so cringy, made me literally hate just giving Fourth Wing the 4 or 5 stars that I originally had. I truly do not care. I really, truly wasted my time. I'm telling you, it's not worth it. It's literally not fucking worth it. Okay, you know how one of my favorite fantasy authors of all time, Robin Hobb, she has 500 to 900 page books with her Realm of the Elderling series, a book per year, right? And even then, mastercraft storyteller, 6 months. And I'm sorry, but 6 months and we got this. What was the rush? What was the rush? I truly am asking the publishing company here, what was the rush in just pushing this book out? Why not wait an extra maybe 4 months of just re-editing purposes to just restructure and just retool the book. Like, you know what? It's done. It's done. I'm not going to even rate this book because it doesn't deserve it. All right, so the next book I read is Starling House, and I also read this for my Patreon book club as well. A lot of these books are majority Patreon book clubs. I actually really, really enjoyed this one. This one was a solid 4.5 out of 5, almost a 5-star, but it wasn't just quite there yet for me. So this one has everything pretty much I love about it. The atmosphere, the writing, oh my god, the writing was just beautiful, glorious, luscious, loved it. And I love the fact that there are also footnotes in here as well. And while I don't really enjoy reading footnotes in books, here just added an extra element of just a reading experience here that I really, really liked. This book, reading it physically, I think is the way to go because it has illustrations in here as well. Also, another fact, it's adult. Like, look at that. Look at this. And my personal favorite, this one. It just added like an extra element of oomph to the story overall. And I fucking loved it. It's not even that long either as well. This is also a standalone, literally checking all the boxes that I love to read in books, right? So this one primarily follows a young woman in her mid-20s trying to navigate and make enough money to send her younger brother to a better school and getting out of this like shitty ass town. However, in this town, of course, there is this renowned house with a lot of mystery attached to it. And in this house, there is one sole caretaker, this young man who everyone in the town hates, and she soon crosses paths with him and manages to somehow secure a housekeeping job in this house with her own motives, of course. While working there, she slowly uncovers the mysterious circumstances, the disappearances, the murders, and how she also connects to the biggest secret of them all. So this was a really delightful surprise, really solid, really surprising. I really, really loved it. Definitely one of my top reads of the year. And I don't know, maybe if I do reread this book, it might become a 5-star. So we'll see. Last and not least, I read Midnight is the Darkest Hour for Gabby's book club, the book troop. This one was really interesting. So I think I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. I can't remember, 2 or 3, something along the lines like that. This book primarily follows a small town in which a murder is uncovered and just the circumstances regarding these two people who are on the wrong side of the tracks on opposite ends fall in love with each other and the rabbit hole they fall into regarding the uncovered murder. So I thought the premise itself was interesting. Mind you, before going into this book, I literally knew nothing about it. I just thought it was a murder mystery psychological thriller. After completing it, I would definitely take out psychological. Thriller is pretty much non-existent. It's a small town drama is what it is. And it did not give me anything. While I absolutely loved Ashley Winstead's first book, In My Dreams I Hold the Knife, which I thought was so fucking good, this one was just like a different book in its entirety. And while I commend Winstead and just almost writing like, it felt like a different genre to me, just like with these different characters, a different story, just a different vibe, just didn't vibe with me, like at all. They were a lot of repetitive flashbacks. Regarding these flashbacks, you already sort of knew what was going to happen, and these flashbacks didn't really offer any subtext or clues to the ongoing larger part of the story. If you like small town mysteries and whatnot, you might be into this book. This book also heavily references Twilight. It was really crazy, really interesting, kind of funny too. The book itself for me was a little boring, and the ending, oh my god, the ending killed me. But I'm glad I read this book for Gabby's book club because it was a lot of fun discussing it. So you guys can definitely check out the live show that we did on her channel. Like, I'm pretty sure this was marketed in the wrong category. Like, whoever was in charge of the marketing for this book, I don't think they understood or even read the source material at all because it was not it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some aspects of like the paranormal, supernatural, and cults, which I thought would really elevate the meat or the story of the book. But alas, that never happened. So there you go. All right, well, that's pretty much my wrap up for this year. December so far, it's going pretty slow. Like, I'm literally in like the biggest reading slump of my life. If it weren't for my Patreon right now, I would not even be picking up a book at the moment. I wouldn't be reading anything. Currently, we're reading one of my favorite books of all time, Pure and Essie. I'll also leave a link to my Patreon down below in case you guys are interested. We have like monthly movie nights, monthly book club, reading sprints, exclusive video, and all that. So yeah, please let me know down in the comments below what recent books you guys have read or loved or hated. I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you all soon in the new video.